Hello everyone, I'm just a regular employee who likes history. This time, I'd like to talk about the American Revolution. But I'd like to explain a particular British story. The First British Empire collapsed. I think I've explained that the country's power would decline after that. As you all know, from the middle to the latter half of the 19th century, there was a period called Pax Britannica, when Britain was the dominant country in international society. It was the heyday of the British Empire, and this was only about half a century after the collapse of the First Empire. What brought Britain to this level of growth? It was Industrial Revolution, and England was the first country in the world to start the Industrial Revolution. That's how industrialization progressed. It grew to the point that it was called the world's factory. As a result of that, England changed from heavy commercialism to free capitalism. In the process, monopoly capital became connected to state power. That's how it transformed into imperialism. That's how Britain became so influential in international society. So, what is the Industrial Revolution? What was the process of the Industrial Revolution? The first step was the invention of machines for the cotton industry. Then, the steam engine was invented to power it, and the use of coal was also started. The steam engine was used to power railroads and steamships, and, finally, the development of the heavy industry. The transportation revolution occurred. The Industrial Revolution was a significant change in society. Well, I've rushed through the explanation so far. I thought you knew that story. Well, I'm sure there are many people familiar with the Industrial Revolution and think that England was victorious because of the Industrial Revolution. But did you know that the expansion of the American continent triggered the Industrial Revolution? Do you know that? The Industrial Revolution is very closely related to the expansion of America. In the end, Britain lost its colonies in America because of its independence. As a result, the United Kingdom has grown for more than 200 years. On this theme, I think I told you about it first. Spain was ahead of England. Spain was the first country to expand into North and South America. They needed slaves very much, right? They needed slaves for high mountains and plantations. But the natives were dying in droves from the pathogens they brought with them. So they didn't have enough slaves. They targeted black people in Africa as new slaves. But, you know, Spain had a problem. They couldn't expand into the African continent. What kind of problem was it? There was a treaty called the Treaty of Tordesillas. This was a treaty with Portugal. To put it simply, Spain was not allowed to go to the western side of the Atlantic Ocean. Because of that, they couldn't expand into the African continent. So, Spain needed a country to bring black slaves from Africa and the exclusive right to trade black slaves with Spain. This trading of black slaves with Spain is called asiento. At first, Portugal had this right, but later, due to various reasons, the Treaty of Utrecht, the peace treaty of the War of the Spanish Succession, gave the British the right to the asiento. And by this, the British started the slave trade with Spain. The one that caused the South Sea Bubble incident was the Nankai Company. I told you about this when we were discussing the bubble economy. If you haven't seen the video, it's quite an exciting story. I think you should have watched it. The South Sea Company began the slave trade. They started by selling guns, and they got slaves in return. That black nation, which is the Kingdom of Benin, sold guns to those black countries. They used the guns to fight wars with other countries. The other countries don't have guns, so they win. And they captured a lot of black people as prisoners of war. By doing this, the Gillis people got a lot of black slaves. And then they went to the Americas and sold those slaves to Spain and so on. In return, they received American industrial products. They brought them back to England. That's how they went to Africa at first. Then they went to America and then came back to England. That was the route that was taken. But gradually, in Africa, guns stopped selling. There were so many guns that were no longer used. You know, it's no use having more guns than the population. That's why Britain has to sell something to Africa to replace guns. That's why they searched for it, and their traditional industry is woolen cloth. And they can't sell that in Africa because it's too hot to sell such fuzzy stuff. What they needed was cotton products, so the British thought about it. In their colonies, some places are scorching, and that's India. India is just as hot as Africa. It's as hot as Africa, right? I don't know how hot it is in Africa, but India is also very hot, reaching 50 degrees Celsius. India has a very active cotton industry. There were many excellent cotton products in India. The British got those unique cotton products from them, and they brought them to the African continent. The Africans saw it and said, "Oh, that's nice." And they said, "We'll exchange more and more slaves for this." The slave trade resumed again. But, you know, the trade between England and Spain became more and more distant from each other. Well, they also started to have wars with Spain. But at that time, the 13 colonies were excellent trading partners. They needed slaves for their tobacco plantations. That's why the slave trade was still going strong. So, they took a new route from this time on, which is to get cotton products from England, or India, as the case may be. And then take those cotton products to Africa. From Africa, they get slaves and then bring the slaves to America. From America, they get tobacco and other products. That was the route that was completed. So I thought, okay, if you think this is going well, think about it carefully. From England, we buy cotton products from India, right? And we use the cotton to trade for slaves. The slaves are then exchanged for American products. And then they bring it back. And so on. If you look at that route, they didn't have any money coming in. The money was going to India. In England, they buy and sell. In the end, it was just exchanged for cigarettes and other things. From their point of view, they were paying for something. The English were not making any money at all. I mean, what is it with India? India was so developed that I wondered what was wrong with them. India was so developed and rich in money. When I saw that, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't accept it. Why aren't they just making cotton products? Can't we make something like that? That's how the Industrial Revolution started. They bought cotton from the US and other countries. They made more and more machines to make cotton products very efficiently. They succeeded in developing these machines. As I said at the beginning, steam engines and coal were used to power the industry. The invention of the locomotive, for example. That's how it all progressed. So, you see, if the British hadn't entered the Americas and if France had taken the 13 colonies, the British would have abandoned the slave trade with the war in Europe. Then there would be no more trade with Africa, right? And then they wouldn't be able to buy cotton. That's why we don't need to make cotton products, so there was no industrial revolution. That's why the 13 colonies expanded into the Americas. It was connected to the development of British imperialism. That's what I'm talking about. So, if you are going to Africa or India, don't forget to bring cotton goods instead of wool. That's all. I hope you find this video interesting and informative. Please like and subscribe to my channel. See you soon.